But, you know, look, some aspects
talk to me
of that
about
I
minimum
agree.
wages.
Well,
penalty rates.
Look, there is possibly an argument to be made around penalty rates, but I would not make an argument for minimum wage being removed or reductions in the minimum wage. We expect in a country like Australia, and in fact it should be a human right, that you have a living wage, that you take home pay that enables you to live a decent life.
Can I raise one point at a time with you or discuss that?
Yep.
What's the cost of living in Sydney and what's the cost of living in Mackay?
Yeah, very different, no doubt.
Is the minimum wage different in those two places?
No, it's not, but you certainly would be able to get high-paying jobs in Sydney than you would in Mackay. Put it that way. There'd be more high-paying jobs available
because of the
in
free
Mackay.
market?
Yes, because of the free market, because of the population density in that area, meaning there's more jobs and there's more corporate activity going on.
Do you know any businesses in Mackay or even outlying areas that are unable to compete and unable to get enough turnover or business volume on a Sunday or a public holiday because of the cost of wages?
There's some businesses on Sundays, and look, you know, changes to the penalty rates. I think that this penalty rates argument is a very different one, but yes, there are businesses that do struggle to make ends meet on a Sunday, but that's just on a Sunday. They make ends meet overall.
Why would they open on a Sunday? For charity?
Well, they feel an obligation to open on a Sunday because
for charity.
If they're well, it almost becomes for charity, because if their clientele turn up and their business isn't open, they fear it might actually it might affect their business the other days of the week. So it's also, you know, for keeping the business integrity intact, I suppose. But look, you know, I do believe that people need to be paid a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. The issue that I have...
What if the business can't make a profit on what the government determines is fair?
Well...
what if they're actually...
Yeah, then that business... So why wouldn't they be able to do that? Because there is a cheaper product coming in that is being...
No, sometimes it's purely service. So I have... My accountant is someone who hires graduates straight out of uni with accounting degrees, and it takes them a long time to earn what he has to pay them as a minimum. He loses money for a long time, but he invests in them, he develops them, he trains them, and then when they're earning him money, he pays them above the award wage and continues to, because competition demands if he doesn't, he'll lose them. They'll go to the next employer who will pay them a portion of the profit that they're making, and they'll go elsewhere. So that's small business being disadvantaged. He's recently had to let one of his graduate accountants go because of increases in the award, and he just couldn't afford to keep them. This person lost their job because the minimum wage was higher than the profit they could earn. I think it's unjust to demand that a business pay somebody more than they're worth, more than they're able to generate in profit. But now let me give you another point, and then I'll not interrupt you for a long time. A minimum wage takes away the last remaining negotiating point that an unskilled, uneducated, inexperienced person has to offer. If a uni student or somebody goes to get a job and they're long-term unemployed, the only thing they've often got to negotiate with is their willingness to work for less. But if the government says you can volunteer for free or you can get paid a minimum wage or above, but anything in between is illegal, I think we're doing that unemployed person and all unemployed people, which is quite significantly youth, a severe disservice, because we're taking away their ability to compete in a free marketplace, because the average business owner doesn't feel like being a charity on Sunday or any other day. They feel like making a profit. That's why they're risking their home. That's why they're working for less than a minimum wage, 80 hours a week, quite often. They're doing it for themselves. yes, there's people that are going to abuse the system, but I just think government's overreached and doing more damage than good with that. Tell me what you think about that.
Well, look, I can understand where you're going with that. And perhaps, I'm not saying definitely, perhaps there is a case to be made that the minimum wage is too high. But if you're talking about removing the minimum wage altogether, that would be something that I would be strenuously against, particularly in a globalised world that we are in. And this goes back to the fundamental question here about globalisation. It hasn't been good. It has not been good for Australia. It hasn't been good for many nations. And why? Because things have followed that lowest common denominator in terms of production costs. So now where wages are the cheapest, this will shift. And if you're competing on this completely level playing field where there's no labour regulations, no minimum wage, basically what we're going to have is Australia following the lowest common denominator and people working for $2 a day. Now, I don't want to see that in my country. I do not want to see that in my country. I would rather pay more for my goods and see people actually having a decent wage than having people that are basically slaves but getting a pittance. And really that's what happens in other countries. They live very, very mediocre, not relative poverty, abject poverty lifestyles because they just do not get enough. They don't get a real living wage from their employer. We expect in Australia you're going to get a real living wage, and even though I think in Australia we do have a real living wage because of our minimum wage structure, and because, let's be honest, unions have fought long and hard for, greater benefits for workers. You've got to respect that. But even despite all that, there's still people that come to me saying, I can't make ends meet. Costs are too high. And so to lower their wages even further, I just can't imagine. But it goes back to that point I said about companies following that lowest common denominator. Once upon a time with trade, with free trade, countries had comparative advantages. You might have excelled in agriculture, you might have excelled in shoemaking or whatever it might have been because of the culture, because of tradition, because of education, skills, whatever. Nowadays, because of increase in technology that can be just transplanted and put anywhere else in the world, because of shipping, massively bringing down the costs of transportation, bulk shipping, there is no such thing as comparative advantage. And comparative advantage was a key thing when you go and have a look at all of the early supporters of free trade, and they'll talk about comparative advantage. There's no comparative advantage now. It just goes to lowest common denominator in terms of production cost. That's not what the original free traders actually envisaged. So this is why we're in the problem we're in. I don't know how to fix it. I just know that there is a problem, and that problem is leading to issues for both business, and then if we go to a solution, as you've suggested, that'll be issues for the workers. Massive problems.
Yeah, I think there is a middle ground.
Yeah.
I think we're too far in the favour of unions. And one of my favourite mentors is Milton Friedman. Not that he ever met me, but he said unions work for their members. They have absolutely no interest in unemployed people. Yeah. They have absolutely no interest in people who cannot pay their union dues. And that's not their fault. That's not immoral or unjust. They're paid to look after those people by those people. Their interests are their members. Their interests are not unemployed youth on the streets looking for jobs, willing to work for less. I think there's a way we can bridge that balance, but it definitely will take a long conversation and many
So it's
parliamentary debates.
Very interesting. You've said that. One of my mentors, who I never met either, sad to say, is the late Bob Santamaria. And Bob Santamaria actually said something which is so true today, that there are three ideologies at war in the world: Christianity, communism or Marxism, and libertarianism or capitalism. And one of those will win out. Only one.
I think there's a tension where we have to aim that nobody wins, nobody loses, but we maintain a balanced tension where everybody's equally unhappy.
That'd be nice, but I think that that ultimately, if you drill down into those three forces and you go to the purest forms of each, it's quite clear that they're in opposition to each other.
Yeah.
The capitalism and libertarianism in its purest form is hyper-individualism. Socialism is state control, no individualism. Christianity is all about the person, but the person in connection with God and with everyone else. If you were to describe it as a philosophy, it'd be communitarianism.
Yeah. And here's the truth about government, is that it's only ever going to be as moral as its voters.
Yeah.
So, you know, whether you've got, look, there was a version of collectivism in the New Testament where everybody sold what they had so they could give to the poor. Yep. That's certainly not a doctrine or intended to be a doctrine forever.
Voluntary as well.
Absolutely. And, you know, and so communism has never ever worked anywhere because the people involved have always been absolutely corrupt, and it's always had extreme wealth and power at the top while everybody else is subjugated under their boots.
And killed.
And yeah, incredible cruelty. It's the worst. But the point is, whatever, I think we've got a great society in Australia, and I think it's capable of being much better and much worse. But the way free markets and free enterprise, yeah, bad people are always going to make a bad system worse, and even a good system bad. But if we're, look, again, there's so many examples of just, it takes good people to make a good government, that we can come up with a solution that is good for everybody as long as we maintain a balance and attention.
And I agree. I think that do I support free enterprise? Absolutely. I support, because to go back to, again, the economy, there's such a thing as a natural economy. It's basically people trading with one another. I might trade my labour for the money that you give me. I might trade the service that I can offer you for, you know, again, money that you can give me that goes and buys something else over here. So that is a natural economy where I would only say that the government, I believe, does have a role in the natural economy in righting wrongs, moral wrongs that come out of it.
Injustice.
For instance, a real life issue where the sugarcane farmers in my area are told by a monopoly milling company, the only one they can supply, that they've got to do certain things that they vehemently do not agree to, but you either do it or we don't mill your sugar.
Do it,
you know. Now that's a complete abuse of market power.
Yep, I agree. Government's role should be minimal, but it's there to protect the citizens from domestic or foreign enemies that would try and harm.
We're on the same song sheet.
Great.